The Zayari Dominion ruled the galaxy with arrogance, their empire stretching across thousands of star systems. They were a race of towering reptilian beings, their scaled bodies thick with natural armor, their minds sharp with centuries of warfare. To them, strength was everything, and only the strong had the right to rule. They had conquered countless civilizations, crushing resistance with overwhelming force. Those who bent the knee were allowed to exist as slaves, while those who dared to fight were erased from history. The Zawari believed in absolute superiority, and when they first encountered humans, they barely considered them worth noticing. At best, they were an amusing anomaly, small, fragile creatures who had somehow crawled their way into space. The Zawari watched them with mild curiosity, much like a scientist observing insects struggling to survive in the dirt. But as the years passed and humans expanded beyond their home system, the amusement turned into disdain. The Zawari saw them build colonies, develop weapons, and challenge the natural order of the galaxy. It was offensive. It was laughable. And so, they mocked them. The first official meeting between humans and the Zawari took place aboard a neutral space station in the Ardentis system. The Galactic Council had insisted on the meeting, urging the Zawari to recognize humanity as an emerging power. But when the human diplomats arrived, the Zawari barely acknowledged them. High Commander Vorkath, a veteran of 100 planetary sieges, sat upon his throne-like chair, his scaled face twisted into an amused grin. He leaned forward, tapping his clawed fingers against the table, his golden eyes gleaming with mockery. "So, these are the creatures that call themselves humans," he mused. His voice carried across the chamber, deep and condescending. "I must admit, I expected more. You stand on 2 legs, yes, but so do many lesser beasts. You speak, but so do the trained pets of our nobles. Tell me, what exactly makes you different?" The human ambassador, an older man named Elias Kane, kept his expression neutral. He had been warned about the Zawari's arrogance, but experiencing it firsthand was something else entirely. He knew that any sign of weakness would only embolden them, so he chose his words carefully. "We are a people who build, who adapt, who endure," he replied evenly. "We have survived our own wars, our own hardships, and we have reached the stars through our determination." Vorkath chuckled, a deep rumbling sound that sent a ripple of amusement through the Zawari delegation. "Survived? Yes, I suppose insects survive when they scurry from the fire. But survival is not strength, human. You mistake endurance for power, and power is all that matters in this galaxy." The meeting was not a negotiation. It was a performance, a stage upon which the Zawari made it clear that humanity was nothing more than an amusing nuisance. They referred to them as upright apes, mocking their biology and their short lifespans. They laughed at the idea that humans could hold their own in the vastness of space. "Your worlds are fragile, your bodies weak, and your fleets are laughable," one Zawari general sneered. "We could wipe you out before you even saw us coming. It would not even be a war, it would be pest control." The humans did not respond to the insults. They did not argue, nor did they rise to the bait. They simply listened, their faces impassive, their eyes unreadable. And when the meeting ended, they left in silence. But something had changed. The Zawari, in their arrogance, failed to notice the shift. They saw humans as creatures beneath them, as something to mock and belittle. What they did not see was the fire that had been lit. The Zawari's mistake was not in underestimating human strength, it was in underestimating human memory. Words can be forgotten, but insults, wounds to pride, and the sting of mockery are not so easily erased. Humans had been called many things in their history: barbarians, fools, savages, but never before had they been so openly, so thoroughly dismissed by an enemy that did not even consider them worth fearing. And that was something no human could ever forgive. The Dominion had made the fatal error of assuming that mockery had no consequences, that words were nothing more than air. But words have power. Words can become battle cries. And for humanity, the words of the Zawari were not just an insult, they were a challenge. A challenge that would be answered in a way the galaxy had never seen before. The Zayari called them apes. They called them weak. They laughed at the thought of humanity standing against them. But in the darkness of space, far from the sneers and condescension of their reptilian overlords, the humans were already planning. They were building, preparing, waiting. And when the time came, when the moment was right, they would show the Zawari what happened when you pushed a species too far. Because history had a lesson that the Zawari had failed to learn, those who mock the weak often do not live long enough to regret it. For years, humanity endured the mockery of the Zawari. They listened to the insults, heard the laughter, and remembered every word. But patience has its limits, and the breaking point came when the Zawari did what they had always done: destroy without consequence. It happened in the Luiten IV system, a thriving human colony that had been growing for decades. The people there were not soldiers, not warriors, just families, scientists, and workers building a future among the stars. But to the Zawari, it didn't matter. They saw a colony outside of Earth's direct protection, a place too far from the core of human strength, and decided to make an example of it. Without warning, without provocation, the Zawari war fleet descended upon Luiten IV like a storm. Their ships, massive and armored, cast shadows over entire cities before they opened fire. Orbital strikes turned buildings into molten craters, streets into rivers of fire. The people had nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. They cried out for help, sending distress signals into the void, but no help would come in time. The Zawari broadcast the entire event across the galactic network, laughing as their warships reduced the colony to nothing more than dust and ash. Billions of lives were lost. Parents died clutching their children. Lovers held each other as fire consumed their homes, and entire generations were wiped out in hours. And when it was done, when Luiten IV was nothing more than a graveyard of cinders floating in space, the Zawari sent one final message to humanity: apes should know their place. The moment those words were transmitted, something inside humanity changed. There was no more room for diplomacy, no more patience for arrogance. The message was received not just by governments and militaries, but by every human in the galaxy. The footage of burning cities, of helpless people screaming into the void, spread across every screen, every communication channel. The Zawari had wanted to instill fear. Instead, they had given humanity something far more powerful: rage. The kind of rage that does not burn out, that does not fade. It was a slow, cold fury, the kind that settles deep into the bones and does not leave. Across every human world, leaders stood before their people and declared war. Scientists who once worked on peaceful technology turned their minds to weapons of annihilation. Engineers abandoned projects of exploration and began constructing war machines. Every hand, every mind, every resource was dedicated to one goal: vengeance. The United Terran Federation, once divided by politics and greed, became a singular force. Nations that had been rivals now stood as one. Old conflicts were forgotten, and every human world spoke with a single voice. Humanity had always been at its most dangerous when it was pushed to the edge. And the Zawari had just pushed them over. The Zawari, in their arrogance, still did not see the threat. They had crushed thousands of species before, and they saw no reason why humanity would be any different. They believed they had ended the war before it had even begun. But they did not understand humans. They did not understand that while other species fought for survival, humanity fought for something deeper: retribution. The Zawari had burned Luiten IV, and now humanity would return the favor in ways they could not imagine. Across hidden research facilities, deep within the darkest corners of space, humanity developed something new. They had always been underestimated for their so-called primitive science, but the truth was far more terrifying. Humanity's understanding of physics, of energy, of destruction, had reached a level that even the greatest Zawari minds could not comprehend. While the Zawari built weapons to destroy cities, humanity built weapons to destroy stars. The Helios-class stellar lance was unlike anything ever seen before, a weapon capable of collapsing a star upon itself, turning it into a singularity, a black hole that would consume everything in its path. It was not a fleet destroyer. It was not a planet killer. It was something worse. It was a tool of extinction, and it was ready. The moment of retaliation came faster than the Zari expected. They had assumed humans would need decades to recover, to build a fleet strong enough to challenge them. They were wrong. Only months after the massacre of Lutein IV, the first human strike was launched. But it was not an invasion. It was not a fleet battle. It was a message. Humanity did not target a colony or a military outpost. They did not strike at a weak, undefended system. They went straight for the heart of the Zari Dominion. The Helios-class Stellar Lance was deployed near the Zawari home system, hidden by the void, waiting for the perfect moment. And then, without a single warning, it was activated. In an instant, the star that had given life to the Zawari for millions of years began to collapse. The Zawari scientists panicked, scrambling to understand what was happening. They had faced planetary sieges before. They had repelled invasions, but never had they seen their very sun betray them. Their star dimmed, flickered, then twisted into something unnatural. The laws of physics themselves bowed to humanity's vengeance as the star collapsed into a black hole, swallowing the Zawari homeworld and every planet in the system. There was no battle, no negotiations, just silence, followed by screams. The Zawari Dominion, the empire that had ruled the galaxy with terror, shattered in an instant. Their fleets were left stranded, their leadership consumed by the void. Those who survived became refugees, aimlessly drifting through space, broken and leaderless. The species they had once enslaved rose in rebellion, wiping out what remained of Zahari control across the stars. And humanity, the so-called upright apes, had proven something undeniable: they were not weak. They were not prey. They were something far more dangerous. They were the architects of destruction. And as the last remnants of the Zawari fled into the cold darkness of space, one final message was broadcast to the galaxy. You thought us weak? You thought us beneath you. You were wrong. We do not seek war, but if you come for us, we will unmake your stars. And the galaxy listened. The stars had watched over the galaxy for millions of years, shining with silent indifference as empires rose and fell beneath them. But on this day, one of those stars would bear witness to something it had never seen before. A war was coming, not of fleets clashing in orbit, not of armies storming cities, but a war against the very heart of a civilization. Humanity had suffered, had been mocked and underestimated, had watched their people burn at the hands of the Zawari. And now, they had chosen their first strike with the precision of a surgeon and the ruthlessness of a force that could not be stopped. The target was HFY Prime, the most important world in the Zawari Dominion. It was not their homeworld, but it was something almost as vital: a central hub of power, a fortress world that commanded the trade routes and supply chains of the entire Dominion. Billions of Zawari lived there, secure in their belief that they were untouchable. Their fleets surrounded the system, their defense platforms glowed with the energy of planetary shields, and their armies stood ready for any invasion. But they had prepared for the wrong kind of war. They had built walls to stop invaders, weapons to destroy ships, and fortresses that could withstand sieges for centuries. None of it would matter when the sun itself turned against them. The attack began in complete silence. The human fleet never crossed into Zahari territory. No warning signals were detected, no alarms sounded. The Zawari command stations remained unaware as the Helios-class Stellar Lance positioned itself in the shadows of deep space, aligning with the HFY star. It was a weapon unlike any other, an invention born not from a desire for conquest, but from a need for absolute retribution. Designed in secret, hidden even from humanity's allies, it was a device built to turn stars into graves. The Lance did not fire missiles, did not launch energy beams, did not use brute force. Instead, it reached into the very core of the sun, destabilizing the delicate balance of nuclear fusion. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The Zawari continued their daily lives. Their fleets patrolled the edges of their systems. Their leaders sat in comfort, completely unaware that their doom had already been written. Then the first signs appeared. The sun of HFY dimmed, its brilliance flickering like a dying flame. Astronomers across the planet rushed to their observatories, confused, worried. Messages flooded the planetary network, questioning what was happening. A star should not flicker. A star should not dim. The light of Exavaris had shone bright for billions of years, but now it pulsed with an unnatural sickness. And then it began to collapse. At first, the Zaura refused to believe what they were seeing. The star was shrinking, twisting, pulling inward as if some invisible force had taken hold of it. Gravity, once their ally, had turned into their executioner. The surface of the star darkened, its energy folding inward, pulling space and time into itself. The planetary shields meant to defend against enemy attacks began to flicker and fail, their power sources draining as the gravitational pull of the collapsing star disrupted every system. The fleets in orbit tried to send distress signals, but the transmissions were stretched and warped, unable to escape the growing singularity. Panic spread like wildfire across Exavaris Prime. The Zawari had always believed themselves superior, had always assumed that no enemy could challenge them. Now they saw their arrogance for what it was, a fatal mistake. They had mocked humanity, laughed at their weakness, dismissed them as insignificant. And now, those same insignificant creatures had just killed a star. Within minutes, the planet's gravity itself began to betray its people. The oceans churned and rose in massive tidal waves. The land cracked as tectonic forces went wild. The skies turned black, and firestorms erupted across entire continents. Cities were torn from the surface, lifted into the void as the planet itself fell toward the abyss, forming at the center of its dying sun. Billions of Zayari screamed in terror, their final moments spent watching as their world was consumed, pulled into a nothingness from which nothing could escape. There was no battle, no fight, no heroics. Just silence, followed by absolute annihilation. From a distant command center, hidden deep within human-controlled space, the architects of this destruction watched as Exavaris Prime vanished from existence. The data feeds showed everything: the flickering star, the desperate transmissions from Zauri commanders begging for answers, the final terrible moment when the sun collapsed into a black hole and took everything with it. The mission had been a success. A single strike had wiped out one of the most critical planets in the Dominion, leaving their trade routes shattered, their command structure in chaos. The Zauri had ruled the galaxy with fear. Now, for the first time in their history, they felt that fear themselves. And humanity was not finished. Across human space, fleets prepared for war. Factories produced weapons at a speed never seen before. Scientists worked on even deadlier technologies, ensuring that what happened to Exavaris Prime could be repeated whenever necessary. Humanity did not seek to conquer. They did not desire an empire. But they had made one thing clear: the age of Zairi dominance was over. They had underestimated the creatures they called apes. They had mocked them. Now they had learned the truth. The first strike had been delivered. A sun had gone dark. And soon, many more would follow. The galaxy had always been loud with the arrogance of the Zoari. Their war fleets roared through the void. Their conquests left planets in ruin, and their voices carried across the stars with mocking laughter. They had ruled for centuries, unchallenged, unafraid. But now, in the aftermath of their greatest mistake, silence had settled over them like a shadow. It was not the silence of peace, nor the silence of surrender. It was the silence of something unseen, something coming, something inevitable. The Zoari had spent years ridiculing humanity, calling them apes, laughing at their supposed inferiority. They had never imagined that the same creatures they mocked would be the architects of their destruction. But then the sun of Exavaris Prime had gone dark, devouring one of their most powerful worlds in a matter of minutes. It had not been a fleet that destroyed them. It had not been an invasion. It had been something far worse. A single, calculated strike that turned one of their strongest bastions into an empty void, leaving nothing behind except a warning: humanity had arrived. The Zawari should have retaliated, should have launched every ship they had, should have burned every human world in response. But they did not. Because for the first time in their history, they were afraid. They had always believed themselves to be the superior race, the rulers of lesser beings. But what do you do when those lesser beings learn how to unmake stars, What do you do when they do not fight for survival, but for vengeance? The high command of the Dominion gathered in their most fortified war station, hidden deep within the heart of their empire. Generals, admirals, warlords, all of them sat in uneasy silence, watching the reports, the intercepted transmissions, the quiet, methodical mobilization of human forces. There were no demands, no ultimatums. Humanity had declared no war. But they did not need to. The Za'ari could feel it coming. Humanity was moving, preparing, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. And the worst part? The Za'ari had no idea where or when or how. Entire Za'ari fleets had gone into hiding, their admirals fearing the same fate as Exodus Prime. Colonies once bustling with activity had fallen into eerie stillness, their people glancing at the sky, wondering if their own son would be next. The once proud warriors of the Dominion, who had slaughtered entire species without a second thought, now whispered among themselves about the fate of their empire. It was not just destruction they feared. It was the silence before it. They had always been used to seeing their enemies scream, beg, fight until the last breath. But humanity did none of that. Humanity did not taunt. Humanity did not waste words. Humanity simply acted. And then, one by one, the disappearances began. At first, it was subtle. A minor supply station lost contact. Then a military outpost. Then an entire fleet of warships, vanishing into the blackness of space without a trace. No wreckage. No distress calls. No survivors. The Zawari could not even confirm if their ships had been destroyed or if they had simply been erased from existence. They sent scouts, spies, probes, none returned. The only clue left behind was a single repeating transmission, looping in the empty void where their forces once stood. You are not hunted. You are already dead. Panic spread like a disease through the Dominion. Their people began to flee from the outer colonies, desperately trying to reach the supposed safety of the core worlds. But safety was an illusion. Because the next attack did not come in the form of a battle. It came in the form of silence again. The Zawari homeworld, Varric, the heart of their empire, woke up one morning to find its communication networks failing. Their satellites, once reliable and strong, now transmitted nothing but static. The planetary defense systems, the shields, the orbital cannons silent. Entire government buildings stood dark, their power sources drained by an unseen force. And then, for the first time in history, the sky above Varric went dark. It was no black hole this time. No superweapon. Just absence. A shadow spread over their planet, vast and unyielding, blocking out the stars. The Za'ari ran to their observatories, desperate to understand what was happening. And then they saw something massive, something unlike anything they had ever encountered. A human fleet. But not a fleet of warships. No, this was something else. Something greater. The sky was filled with the cold, silent forms of human dreadnoughts, weapons of destruction designed not just to fight, but to erase. They did not fire. They did not move. They simply existed. A silent judgment looming over the Zawari homeworld, a promise of what was to come. The Za'ari leadership fell into chaos. Some demanded an attack, but against what? The human ships stood beyond their reach, untouchable, waiting. Others begged for diplomacy, but who would they negotiate with? Humanity had made no demands, no offers, no calls for surrender. They had simply arrived, and that was enough to shatter the illusion of Za'ari supremacy. And then, after hours of waiting, a single message came through 5 simple words, carried across every communication channel, echoing through every corner of the Za'ari Dominion. You will never see us coming. That was all. No fleet moved. No weapons fired. And yet, the Za'ari knew, deep in their bones, that their empire had already fallen. The war had never been about battles. It had never been about who had the stronger fleet, the better weapons. The war had always been about fear. And humanity had already won. The silent reckoning had begun. The galaxy had always been a place of war, of conquest, of empires rising and falling under the weight of their own arrogance. The strong ruled, and the weak perished. That was the way of things. The Zayari Dominion had believed this more than anyone, carving their empire from the bones of 100 species, crushing any resistance with fire and steel. They had laughed when they first encountered humanity, another primitive race struggling to reach the stars. They had mocked them, enslaved them, burned their colonies, and declared them unworthy of existence. But now there was no laughter, no arrogance, no pride. Only silence, only fear. Because the humans had done something no species had ever done before. They had brought a reckoning, not with fleets, not with armies, but with something far worse. A warning. The first sign had been the fall of HFY Prime, a world consumed in an instant when its sun collapsed into a black hole. The Zayari had not understood how. There had been no invasion, no enemy ships, no battle. One moment, their most powerful fortress world stood, its defenses unmatched, its fleets strong. The next, it was gone, erased from existence by forces they could not comprehend. Then came the disappearances. Outposts, fleets, entire cities, vanishing without a trace. No wreckage, no signals, no answers. And then the silence. Human ships, vast and unyielding, had appeared over Varric, the Zahari homeworld, not to attack, but to watch. They had spoken only 5 words before vanishing into the void. You will never see us coming. Now, the galaxy was watching. The other empires, once cautious allies of the Zawari or neutral observers of their cruelty, now whispered among themselves. They had once viewed humanity as weak, an insignificant species with no place among the great powers. But the destruction of HFY Prime, the silent strikes, the absence of demands, this was not the work of weakness. This was something else. Something that had no need for diplomacy, no interest in negotiation. Humanity had not declared war. They had not asked for surrender. They had simply acted. And now, every empire in the galaxy was asking the same question: who is next? On the bridge of a Zawari battleship, Admiral Vakar stood frozen, his claws gripping the edges of his command console. His ship was one of the last remaining in the once mighty Zawari fleet, patrolling the outskirts of their crumbling empire. He had survived every war, every uprising, had crushed resistance with ease. But this was beyond anything he had faced. The humans had not sent war fleets to hunt them down. They had not engaged in open combat. Instead, they had let fear do the work for them. His crews whispered of human shadows lurking in deep space, of an unseen force watching them from the void. Every sensor scan showed nothing, but still, the feeling remained they were not alone. The ship's AI suddenly flickered, the controls freezing for a brief moment before a transmission played across every screen. It was not a message from Zawari Command. It was them, the humans. The screen was filled with static, and then words. Simple. Cold. Unforgiving. You were warned. The lights flickered. The engines powered down. The weapon systems went silent. Across the ship, alarms blared as the crew scrambled to understand what was happening. And then, before anyone could react, the ship was simply gone. No explosion. No battle. No escape pods. It had been there one moment, and the next it was nothing more than empty space. A single message remained, burned into the console of every ship in the sector. We do not need war to destroy you. We only need time. The Zayari Dominion, once the most feared empire in the galaxy, had become nothing more than a crumbling relic, a dying beast thrashing in the darkness. The remaining warlords, the last remnants of their once mighty fleet, fled into the void, hoping to escape the silent hand of humanity. But there was nowhere left to run. The other galactic empires, watching from the shadows, knew the truth. The Zayari were finished. But this was not just about them. This was a warning. To all who had looked upon humanity with contempt, who had viewed them as lesser beings, who had believed they could be conquered without consequence, the message was clear. Humanity had been pushed. They had been broken. They had been burned. And in return, they had become something the galaxy had never seen before. They did not seek power. They did not desire to rule. They did not need to fight wars like the others. They only needed patience. The stars had always belonged to the strongest. And now, for the first time, the galaxy understood the strongest had arrived.